Welcome to this reading. My name is Professor Smith, and I will be reading through Exposing the Spirit of Ashtoreth by Jacob Folk. This subject matter has great relevance for today. Who was Ashtoreth? Who was Baal, her consort? We will discuss this returning goddess of Phoenicia, also referred to in the scripture as the goddess of the Sidonians, as she is one of the false gods that drew King Solomon away from the truth. Today, Ashtoreth is known in all cultures as Ishtar, Easter, and Astarte. Notice the symbolism of the star. Well, we hope you enjoy, and may the Almighty Yahweh bless you. Okay, folks, here we are. We're back again. We're going to continue in this book, Ashtoreth. Exposing the spirit of Ashtoreth. And now we're going to progress to section 15. And the title for this is Satan Swayed a Third of the Stars. And so this is based upon Revelation chapter 12, verse 4. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Did you know that 67% of church attendees in America are women? That means that there are at least 2 women per man presently going to church. Hello? We are telling 1/3 of church attendees, women, to settle for either a non-believer or be single. Of the 33% of women who attend church, are they all strong, devout, and qualified suitors? Lucifer drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven. This is believed to be 1/3 of the angels of heaven and worshippers of the kingdom. It's very odd to think that 1/3 of the kingdom worshippers in the United States don't have much of an option but to give into worldly ways or be single. Who and what will they marry? The only option available is to marry the world according to the standards we have allowed the enemy to set. You see, the enemy didn't just sway 1/3 of the stars of heaven, he swayed the church to follow the same pattern. Ask any single God-fearing woman how to find a good marital suitor is going. She will quickly tell you it's next to impossible. God-fearing men are swooped up quick, fast, and in a hurry. The most common quote is, all of the good men are taken. This is part of Satan's monogamous lie. It's a genius scheme he has created. He knows that the more women that settle for less than a man, the less God-fearing children and offspring that come into the world. This ultimately robs the surest future growth of the kingdom. We must give women an option. Sisters must give women an option. That option being that women don't have to settle for a lesser man simply because he's all that is available. No wonder women are becoming feminist. We've limited their options to men who won't lead and love them properly. Their understanding of men is distorted because the men available don't live and look like Messiah. What woman would want something that's not good for her? The church leadership is literally to blame for these issues. The removal of true biblical patriarchy has caused a domino effect in the family unit that has led to the mess we are presently in. Gender confusion, homosexuality, and strong feminism is the result of removing the true created purpose of marriage, which is based on patriarchy. Once the truth was removed, a lie had free rein to depict what it looked like. When Disney becomes the blueprint of a marital relationship rather than the unadulterated word of Elohim, a mess becomes the final product. We must reprogram what we've adopted and uproot the Ashtoreth worship. The future is dependent upon us coming back to God and his ways. Women who must settle for what's left of men will then produce more unbelieving future children than anything. Men have had no pressure to step up and be godly leaders. Statistics show that the man is generally the one that determines a child's future belief system. Unless the home is broken up, the statistics show that when a father is committed to going to church, the child is 80% more likely to serve Elohim than a child only attending church with their mother. Satan is desperately keeping women from marrying devout, godly men. Unfortunately, it has been working. The monogamy lie is the greatest weapon in his arsenal for this specific battle. Nearly 70% of divorces are filed by women. The majority of men divorcing women is based on a woman's infidelity. Next in line is his inability to live in peace through incompatibility. The hard truth is that if biblical polygamy was accepted again, divorce would almost be eliminated. We see in the Muslim faith that divorce is far less common due to patriarchy. Now, if that can flourish in the Muslim faith, where Christ-like love is absent, how much more do you think it can flourish in a loving, sacrificial, biblical faith? Could you imagine the blueprint of patriarchy under the operation of genuine Christ-like love? It would be a heavenly kingdom in demonstration. Picture this. The man loves like Christ. He leads, provides, teaches, and sets the example for forgiveness, grace, joy, peace, truth, and love. Imagine wives who don't operate in jealousy, pride, and selfishness. Sisters working together, laughing, building, helping, strengthening, and esteeming one another. What does this look like? The answer is simple. It looks like the actual biblical church in operation. Why? Because that's what the home is supposed to look like. It's the first church example. The problem is that the home does not operate with this understanding. Even the church today is split, selfish, divided, prideful, and doesn't operate in love out of its own members. This is why the mindset in church is, don't take my position. We have to make sure our church is the biggest and the best. Don't sing better than me, preach better than me, have a better sanctuary than me, and so on. It's selfish, competitive, and jealous of one another. We want to be the only one loved by the husband. Anything that threatens something special and unique about us is met with resistance. This is the Lucifer spirit. It's Ashtoreth worship within the people of Elohim. This mindset is an issue because we haven't become confident in understanding who we are in Messiah and how unique and special we are, no matter what someone else has, does, or gets. Due to the enemy's trick on society, we can only embrace how special we are if we are the only ones. This means no competition. This is why polygamy is not an option for most women. Polygamy means competition in the eyes of insecurity. The prophetic church story of the Song of Songs shows the women declaring, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine, even though she was not his only wife. And she continued talking with the other wives who knew who she was to him. The other wives called her blessed, not out of jealousy, but out of love. It's a picture of the beauty of people being able to surrender their lives to Messiah and being able to enjoy seeing other people surrender their lives as well. This is the same picture of loving to see someone blessed by the husband. Why is this so hard to accept today? That's an easy answer, but you won't like it. It's because women love themselves more than they love their sisters, husbands, and even their God. How many times amongst Christians do people rejoice that someone has to come to Christ, but when they have the gift or calling that is the same as theirs, it makes them jealous and selfish? Someone else starts getting attention from the pastor or church of God, or we spiral into jealousy. Another church opens in town and rival mode kicks in. We want to be the only lover. Instead of being confident in Messiah, our confidence is based on feeling special as numero uno. This was Lucifer's problem. He had to be number one. We are just like Lucifer in the sense that we are extremely significant to the master. Yet there is a common mentality that we are not satisfied unless we are it, quote unquote. This is the same mentality that's been programmed into women through Disney, secular society, and Greco-Roman ways. We've adopted a mindset that cannot wrap itself around the thinking of not being the best or to the only. To be anything else is to not be valuable, which is completely contrary to the biblical concept that Messiah has called us to, quote, love your neighbor as yourself, unquote. As yourself, literally. This isn't just in the areas that we conveniently choose. This is in every area. A true Christian brings people to Messiah, or at least tries to, Could you imagine truly, genuinely loving a sister as yourself? Knowing you're married to a godly man and your sister is having to find scraps of a man or just be alone? The selfish lack of soul winning begins in the home and family before it gets to the church. Loving your neighbor as yourself is perfectly demonstrated more in polygamy than in any other form. When a woman accepts another woman into her home to be married to her husband, she demonstrates the ultimate example of loving another as herself. I will go a step further and say that she demonstrates the angels of heaven as they have gladly accepted us into their home. As you will see regularly in this book, polygamy is the clearest revealer of how deeply the demonic spirit of Ashtoreth has been adapted into the way we worship subconsciously. Lucifer brought it to earth. Ashtoreth worship was so ingrained in the camp of Elohim's people, the Israelites, that they never completely shook it. History continues to repeat itself over and over. We see a king or prophet rise up and remove it, only to see it come right back again shortly after. By the time Jezebel came into the scene, Ashtoreth worship had become the norm. She was the picture of a woman who ran the show. She hated the prophet of God, Elijah, more than anyone. She was committed to killing him and stopping his voice. What was his voice? It was instructing the people to return to Yahweh with all their hearts. How long will you halt between two opinions? If the Lord be God, serve him. This is the same place the church is at today, halting between being committed to Yahweh or committed to Baal and Ashtoreth worship and nature. The spirit of Jezebel hates this message because it hates anything that doesn't exalt her position. One reader's note here. One thing to realize is that Baal, I think he did mention this, means the Lord. One of the things that I think is important for the community to understand is there is one additional key into this discussion, and that is the key of not bringing his name to nothing. That's one of the Ten Commandments. Do not bring my name to nothing. You might see it written in your King James Bible as you shall not take the name of. What they do is they take Yod He Vav He and superimpose the Lord over that in English. And so they're hiding the name. They're bringing it to nothing. So even in the English Bibles, there is a clear delineation between simply referring to the master as the Lord or his proper name. Now, notice with the proper name, there's far more intimacy, you see. The Messiah wanted his disciples to be more than just servants. He wanted them to come, he wanted them to come to intimate fellowship with him and be his friends, not just servants. And so I think an aspect that I just wanted to comment on here is there is an importance of the name here. But it could be that the author, maybe he is, this is for more of a general audience. So if there's too many concepts that are intersecting that are causing such a foreign picture than what they're used to, I could see the drawback of that. But continuing on here. Polygamy revived would nearly eliminate the biblical adultery amongst its believers. Muslim countries have very few cases of adultery, and homosexuality is almost non-existent, while divorce seldom ever occurs. Amongst Muslim husbands, Yahweh is one of dictatorship, and therefore I'm gonna say God, and they say Allah is one of dictatorship, and therefore their believers pass down their version of submission from their God to themselves and then to their wives as one of dictatorship, not agape love. But what about the true Elohim? What if the husband wasn't a dictator? What if he is completely committed to a truly loving Elohim? An Elohim who demands that men who follow him are to sacrificially demonstrate the love of Messiah. An Elohim who leads the husband to pass the same love to his woman or women, the way that Yahweh loves us. How much more effective and fluent would polygamy work in that culture? In fact, how much more desirable to women would it be to marry that type of man? Women's rights are only an issue if she marries a dictator rather than a man who is so committed to a truly loving Elohim that he covers, protects, provides, loves, teaches, leads, and even empowers his wife or wives the way that the Messiah does us. In fact, a man already married is the clearest candidate to see how he would treat a wife by seeing how he already does, thus making him a better candidate than a man who hasn't figured out how to be a loving and mature husband yet. Women could choose their ideal man if they can put jealousy and envy to the side, of course. Let's go back to the Muslim culture for a moment. In those countries where polygamy is legal, it is not legal for Christians. Why? Because it's known that the father spreads the belief system that populates after his kind. Think about it. The Muslim culture knows it works effectively and does not want the Christian culture to adopt it. This produces more children who are a kingdom example in stronger, unified homes. It would flourish even greater within the church. The main resource that the Muslim culture has used to grow faster than the Christian church isn't the desirableness of their religion, but rather the art of growth through polygamy. The father has passed on his religion through the understanding of patriarchy. It's time for biblical believers to wake up before we are completely left behind. While we stand idly by and create a culture where families disappearing and Christians, specifically devout ones, dwindle in numbers, we can't help but must open our eyes and accept that maybe we have missed something. The Muslim faith is outgrowing us so fast that at this pace, our children and grandchildren will be a part of a world that is so difficult to live freely as a believer. The enemy is multiplying the children of this world while slowly squeezing out the population of genuine children of Elohim. When will the church stop falling for the same lies of Satan that 1/3 of the angels of heaven fell for? It's time to make a change. Do you know what will replace the void of those 1/3 angels that left? Yahweh's new lover, mankind. Spiritual polygamy is going to fill the void that heaven is missing. Let me read that again. Spiritual polygamy is going to fill the void that heaven is missing. Makes you wonder what could work for the 1/3 of earthly worshipers who don't have a kingdom-minded husband. Polygamy is biblical for a reason. Okay, so here we are on section 16, continuing on. Marriage is a calling. And this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 17. But as God hath distributed to every man, as the master hath called every one, so let him walk. And so ordain I in all the churches. Understanding that there is a different calling to marriage is significant, the successful furtherance of the kingdom on earth. One of the greatest issues with Christians is the box we have continually put God in, the box that best suits our trained way of thinking, or the one that best suits our personal life. Understanding that God ministers and uses all different types of marriages to reveal his own different relationships is significant. Let's look at the different types of marital life we see in the scriptures, and then see why Yahweh uses each type to reveal himself to us. Hosea was called to marry an unfaithful wife, and likely her friend as well. Hosea chapter 3, verse 1. Why? To understand Elohim. Hosea obeyed Elohim because he understood that marriage is a calling and not an entitlement. God used Hosea's marriage to demonstrate this with Israel and Judah. God was dealing with unfaithfulness from both nations. He calls Hosea to live a life that would teach people about Yahweh's marital situation. Hosea married harlots by Yahweh's command to fulfill an understanding of spiritual things, because that's the purpose of marriage, to understand spiritual things. Many people are called to monogamous marriages. Monogamy is the picture of our one-on-one relationship with Messiah. Each one of us has a direct solo relationship with Messiah that does not involve anyone else. This is probably why we cling to a, quote, monogamy only, unquote, revelation, because we struggle to see the big picture outside of ourselves. We primarily focus on what is best for us individually and directly, when it comes to kingdom stuff. However, one relationship that we must truly develop is the monogamous relationship of our individual growth and commitment to Messiah. One that is not based on anyone else. One where we develop our own individual intimacy with Him, despite anyone else's walk and relationship with Him. We are not to be solely dependent upon group worship or what the church as a whole is doing, nor should we be dependent on always getting a word from the pastor or other saints, but rather we must seek a direct understanding of Him. While these all come into play, we must still develop our individual relationship with Messiah. As mentioned earlier, the woman in the Song of Solomon declared, quote, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine," unquote. Even though she was in a polygamous situation, she had her own monogamous marital walk with her husband within that family structure. This is significant. If not for monogamy, how would Yahweh ever express our significance to Him individually? Monogamy is a calling. Many people who are called to monogamous marriages. Let me read that again. Many people are called to monogamous marriages. We are not cookie cutters, but we are each significantly and differently called when it comes to marriage. You are not called to monogamy simply because you want to be. Unfortunately, many people reject their genuine call, just as Jonah did, simply because it didn't fit what they want for their lives. If you truly seek Elohim and open your heart to Him, you will find yourself being tugged and led by His Spirit into your marital calling. Monogamy is the picture of one male, Elohim, and one female, you or me, being created for Him. Just as Eve was made for Adam. Yes, that's why she exists. You were made for Elohim. Not just we as a whole, but you are specifically. We as a collective people were made for Elohim, but it's significant that we understand that we also individually, quote unquote, were made for Elohim. Monogamy is the marital status that reveals how individually significant we are. This is exactly why women specifically shun the idea of polygamy, because it appears to remove the picture of being special or significant. The first person to experience this feeling was Lucifer. Even though he was extremely significant, he hated the idea of Yahweh having another lover in mankind. He failed to understand that mankind did not affect his significance to Elohim. This is the same feeling the oldest child gets when a new child is born into the home. They fail to understand the love of a parent, that even though they may share the parent's love, they won't receive 1 ounce less of the love their parent has for them. They will not become less significant in any way, nor do they receive less love. The only thing that changes when more wives are added is that no longer does the world revolve around the first wife. We hate that. However, many of us must experience that to grow and mature, some are called to be an only child, and some are called to have many siblings, just as some are called to monogamy and some polygamy or other forms of marriage that we will list. You cannot graduate to polygamy if you don't first understand your role in monogamy. Polygamy will not work for you if you are not secure in who you are monogamously first. This is similar to our walk with Messiah, in that it cannot grow to being kingdom-minded and giving ourselves to the growth of others unless we are confident in who we personally are in Messiah first. I will make a bold statement and declare that polygamy is not accepted in most of today's churches because the mentality in the church is too immature. The quicker we grow to a kingdom mindset and not the mindset of what's best for us directly and individually, the quicker the church will understand and accept polygamy. Women will want to bring other women into their homes where they can grow and flourish in the area of spiritual teaching and accountability, rather than wish their fellow sisters good luck with what remaining suitors are out there. This is the picture of true evangelism for the kingdom. It's the same as a saint not opening the doors for others because they are afraid of what they may lose, such as their position as Sunday school teacher, choir director, and so on. We are more concerned with what we may lose than what someone else may gain. We see in 1 Corinthians 7 that some people are called not to be married at all. The Apostle Paul possibly had this calling, as do many others. Some are only called to remain unmarried for a season to experience singleness and the difficulty of the right love coming into their lives. Reader's note here. I think I might have mentioned this before. It is likely that Paul was married, and I like how he says likely, because that leaves possibility. And maybe he's aware of these other documents that the early church held, and some of the Orthodox and Catholic Church have them today, that seem to indicate that Paul was married to a very high-ranking, to the daughter of a very high-ranking Pharisee, but that when Paul converted, her family got involved and said, "Look, you can't be with this apostate anymore. We want you back home." And that's essentially what happened. And so Paul chose to remain unmarried. Maybe he loved her so desperately, and he never was able to love again. There's a lot of reasons why Paul may have continued in singleness after reputedly that event. Carrying on here in the book. Why would some be called to not be married at all? Paul declares that the married care for the things of the world and how they may please their spouse. Notice the wording that declares it is a worldly thing to be consumed with pleasing your spouse. Should you? Yes, in a sense. It's commanded to a degree. Is pleasing your spouse wrong? No, but it very well can be. How? Remember, marriage is about understanding and glorifying the kingdom. Therefore, if your marriage is about pleasing each other for a reason outside of the kingdom, it's worldly. Did you grasp that? The only way your marriage is not worldly is if it points you both more to Messiah. If this revelation could capture momentum in the church, it would change everything. It is a worldly thing to miss or not walk in your calling by pleasing your spouse. Who you marry can make or break your purpose. This is why you must marry in the Messiah. And that's found in 1 Corinthians 7:39 and 2 Corinthians 6:14. This calling of not being married reveals Yahweh in its nature, that the kingdom comes first and foremost. This is why Yahweh can't change his ways, nature, or word for what best suits us and our feelings. Yahweh would separate himself from us and the angels before he would compromise who he is. We see this is the fallen angels' removal from heaven, as well as the flooding of the earth that left only 8 souls alive. Our feelings are not the kingdom. Let me read that again. That's so important for the readers the listeners to understand. And it's critical to get this. Our feelings are not the kingdom. The master and his ways are the kingdom. Just as your spouse's feelings are not our calling, only his ways are. And often you have to fight past your spouse's feelings to walk in the kingdom's calling for your life. Some are waiting for the right time or the right spouse to get married. Yahweh has been waiting for his eternal bride for thousands of years now. She has been prepared herself, just as your spouse is not yet groomed, prepared, and ready. Let me read that again. He's speaking of the assemblies, the church, and speaking of she being the church in relation to Yahweh. She has been preparing herself just as your spouse is not yet groomed, prepared, and ready. Maybe it's just not your time yet. What if you are divorced? Yahweh hates divorce. Divorce is ugly and painful, yet it exists for a reason. Yahweh has personally experienced divorce from Israel, Jeremiah 3, verse 8. He also experienced it during the fall in the garden with both man and the rebellion of Lucifer. How do we know Yahweh's experience if we could not relate? Remember, marriage is to understand the kingdom. It is not to make ourselves as home on earth, but to draw us closer to him in heavenly places. He makes himself known to us often in our experiences. There would not be a biblical reason for divorce if it didn't play a role in understanding the kingdom. The reason divorce of infidelity by a believing wife is the only grounds for a man to divorce his wife on earth is because Yahweh will only put us away if we are unfaithful. Reader's note here. I think I've addressed this issue before. This monolithic viewpoint of the requirements that would perhaps allow a biblical divorce, according to Deuteronomy 24. We're not just talking about rank sexual impurity, which is a man who is a woman's, not her husband, inserting his seed in her womb, such that you have her rightful husband's seed in the womb and the interloper's seed in the womb. That is adultery, the mixing of seeds. So it would be akin to a farmer planting both corn and wheat in the same field. From an agricultural standpoint, that would yield chimerism. And so this is the reason why Yahweh doesn't want this mixture. But there are um, there are spiritual adulteries too. What if a man marries a woman, discovers that she's a witch, a bona fide witch, literally that's hiding it? I mean, witches are very sly. They know how to hide, and they will insert themselves in places to where they think they can have the greatest influence. A lot of time that might be in the church, that might even be in a what the unaware Christian man, so to speak. Okay, there's that. Remember that the Bible tells us that rebellion is as witchcraft. Now, I'm not talking about, the problems that happen in marriage. I'm talking about abject rebellion that is consistent, that is chronic, that continues and continues and continues. Okay, that is a form of spiritual adultery against the uh, against the Yahweh given authority of the husband who is walking in the role of a godly man. So this is the thing too to consider, and so it's not just this monolithic idea, but I'm going to continue on here. These are just my reader's notes for you guys to take or reject. Just my years of study in this issue. It's quite a comprehensive study to understand what is be an acceptable Deuteronomy 24 procedure and what would not be. Continuing on. Outside of being unfaithful, he will never leave us nor forsake us if we continue to be faithful to him. One who is married to an unbeliever and working on them to be converted is also a distinct calling. This is a picture of the Gentiles who have not yet been converted, but eventually came to themselves and fell in love with Messiah. Messiah waited out their conversion and repented before they could become his spouse. Some people are called to be in a marriage where they will eventually convert their spouse. Let me be clear. As a believer, you are not called to marry an unbeliever, but rather, if you have converted, since being married to an unbeliever, then you may possibly be called to wait for them to be converted. Yahweh in his holy state did not marry the Gentiles before they converted. 1 Corinthians 7:15. We haven't been called to bondage, but to peace. Let me make another note here, just something to think about. Remember that in Acts chapter 15, there was four basic categories whereby Gentiles had to obey in order to come in the gate to be believers in Yeshua. Okay, the idea is that at the Sabbath they would join the other Notzrim, the Nazarenes, right along with the Jews, and get the rest of the scriptures, and then they would grow and put those principles into place in their life. Now, the Gentile church has stopped at those four categories, and then there's some things that the church added on later. They put some restrictions in place. They opened up some things, okay, that were not in alignment with the word of Elohim. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Continuing on here. Conversion is the goal. Otherwise, your marriage cannot reflect Messiah and his kingdom. To remain married to an unbeliever forever is not to represent Messiah, as you will not spend eternity with someone who does not convert. You must know if this is your calling. This is why Paul declared it not to be a commandment to remain married to an unbelieving spouse. Why? Because marriage is about reflecting the kingdom. Notice two major wordings here in 1 Corinthians 7:10, and to the married in verse 13, but to the rest. There is a difference in recognition. Unequally yoked marriages does not fall under the umbrella of Yahweh's command, but require earthly wisdom to make the best of a bad situation. And this is why it went from verse 10, the Lord commands, to verse 12, I say, not the Lord. Another reader's note here. There may be some different ideas on Paul's letters. I personally accept Paul as a true apostle, but I also am somewhat cynical about how the church, especially after the Council of Laodicea and Nicaea, and also after St. John Chrysostom, who basically they may have altered some things there in order to try to make the divide even worse than Paul intended. Remember that Paul said himself that after his going, his going into the kingdom, that after his leaving, grievous wolves would come in, not sparing the flock, and men of perverse mind would arise from within and turn many away from the faith. So that faith is a continuation of the faith of the early apostles and prophets, which includes the commands of Elohim. So that's something to consider too. So it has to do with which is the foundation by which we determine these things. Are we using Paul as a top-down approach to the pattern whereby we strain through the commandments of Genesis through Malachi? Or are we using Genesis through Malachi as the strainer whereby we sift through Paul's letters? Okay, so it's like a different way of looking at things. So this has to do with interpretive method here. And as you get more mature in the faith, I think you'll see that the church has sort of inverted this in a lot of ways. But continuing on here, marriage is recognized by a commitment made by two people before Elohim. In Paul's time, it was a productive source of evangelism, as many times one spouse would convert first. Today, this is a very rare case. This is not to say it's impossible, but if there is no conversion, we have likely missed Yahweh's call somewhere and chosen our own path. Verse 39 reveals that Yahweh only recognizes marriage in the Messiah. This is why Ezra commanded divorce amongst the men who married pagan wives in the last chapter of Ezra. Why? Because marriage is to reflect the kingdom, and Elohim does not yoke himself to a bride that will not and does not reflect his kingdom. So this is 2 Corinthians 6:14. Be ye not unequally yoked to unbelievers. Another reader's note. Also remember that these were consummate pagans that they had. There was the chance of conversion was extremely slim. And many of these marriages were a marriage of convenience, so to speak, such that they had someone. And it seems like a rather brutal commandment that Ezra gave to simply separate these families, but it was necessary for the preservation not only of the stock of Israel, but also for the faith. And so this is why this principle is carried forward in 2 Corinthians 6:14. Continuing on, notice that 1 Corinthians 7:17 clarifies the whole situation. As Yahweh has called you, therein shall you walk. You must seek Elohim and know your marital calling to be in his will. Your calling isn't the same as another person's calling. It is your distinct calling. Don't pattern your marriage after anything but what Yahweh has called you to. There is also a call to polygamy for many. Yes, this is a calling. Many men were obviously called to this form of marriage throughout Scripture, and many still are. We will see this calling and need for today's society to grow even more as we continue to approach the ever-growing feminist and gender-confused community. Every time a far left movement comes along, a far right movement is necessary in order to create balance. The gender confusion, homosexuality, and the feminist movement has gone as far as possible. If we are going to salvage anything, a far right movement to patriarchy in its clearest form must be in the works. Readers know. Also, I think he's absolutely right about this. Remember the concept of the pendulum. The pendulum swings back and forth and when the pendulum is given the kind of I'm speaking of physics here and a device, many of you are familiar with the pendulum. If it swings the furthest out one way, it picks up speed as it comes back, and it has to swing the other way just as far. See, and so this is a law of nature. It's a law of physics. How it also goes along with the idea of nature hates a void. So why is patriarchy, why is polygamy coming back in this latter day? Because the void is as there are men completely capitulating to Ashtoreth and becoming mirror images of the, well, for lack of a better term, the symptom. I'll say it again, the symptom of Baal. And so that's really the crux, a lot of what's being presented in this book. Continuing on. Every time Yahweh's revived the kingdom on earth throughout the Old Testament, it was preceded with the far right movement by his people, chopping down every grove of Ashtoreth, that's feminism, and breaking down the altars of Baal, worldliness. It was an extreme patriarchal commitment to Elohim and to him alone. Why is polygamy a calling? For one, it is the picture of the kingdom, his love, operation, and balance of the many different people, opinions, and natures coming together in unity to make up his church. The many members of one body, Ephesians 5:30, polygamy is the purest example of sacrificial and selfless love toward our Elohim by loving his people who are also committed and in covenant with him. What purer way to love your neighbor as yourself than to give someone access to everything you have, even to your husband? This is the same as the picture of bringing people to our Elohim. A mature sign of a Christian is when it's no longer about them, but instead they bring others to their King because they are committed to the picture and the purpose of the kingdom above their own self. This is the same picture of esteeming our brothers and sisters in Messiah to their place in Elohim without trying to be better than one another. This is a place where insecurity and pride cannot live. A place where his will trumps, let me say that again, a place where his will trumps our own feelings. A place where we walk in true brotherly and sisterly love, not loving ourselves more than another, but with a sacrificial kingdom love. Jealousy is when we are concerned that someone else might get what we want or have or feel entitled to. Jealousy amongst the saints is a demonic spirit straight from Lucifer. True kingdom love says, quote, I win when you win, unquote. In our competitive society built by Satan, the God of this world, the little g God of this world, we view someone else stepping into what we have desired and claimed as a threat to our identity. Instead, we need to work towards dying to our will in our kingdom so that we can understand that Yahweh's will alone is where our happiness and joy truly dwells. When your identity is in Him and not yourself, then insecurity is shattered and the kingdom can flourish. That's what a successful polygamist home represents. A flourishing kingdom on earth where insecurity, pride, selfishness, jealousy, competitiveness, and worldly vision have no rule or reign. The greatest equalizing example on earth of walking in complete brotherly love is loving your neighbor as yourself. What clearer way can that be demonstrated than polygamy? Let me read that again. What clearer way can that be demonstrated than polygamy? Have you truly sought Yahweh on your marital calling? Reader's note, a lot of details in there, a lot of elements there for people to consider. And also as where we as husbands lack, then there are many things in here to help us, provoke us, to try to up our game, so to speak, and be better men, be better priests of our homes. It's a motivating thing, really, when you have the potential for growth of your particular family. It motivates you. You realize, wow, I've got to up my game. I got to do better than what I have done. And so that is also something to consider. And so I was so happy to be able to offer this to you, this reading. I'm trying to improve my reading skills, and the more I do, I think I will, so that it makes it okay for listening. And I hope you guys got something out of this. Put some comments down in the video. I don't even mind, suggestions for improvements. I try I try to improve as I go along because I want this to be available in an audio format for believers out there because there are so many nuggets of truth in this thing that I really love this book, and I hope you guys do too. And I hope that it's sort of a self-reflection too. How are we managing as men to reflect the kingdom? How are we managing as men to reflect Messiah and how he manages the church or the churches? See? And so the one we look toward is Messiah Yeshua. How did he behave? How did he relate with people? And we try to ask the Father to help us to mirror our life after that. And then when that comes into place, then other stuff below begins to fall into place, you see? But first, it begins with us men. And I can see that very clearly here, and he really brings this out. The responsibility is heavy, my friends, and particularly to the men, the responsibility is heavy. Let us pray and ask the Father to help us bear up under this burden of responsibility. Our Heavenly Father promises He will not give us a burden that's greater than we can bear. So let us do all we can to manifest the ways of Messiah and to allow His will flourish in our lives. And with that, I want to thank you. And Yah willing, we'll get another one up shortly. Shalom, shalom.